Hi, welcome to Elements in Focus. What is a trust? That is specifically what we're going to be talking about today. If you are tuning in for the first time, thank you so much for watching. If you've been with us for a while, again, thank you for tuning in. If you're new, this is where myself, Aaron, and one of our advisors, specifically I have Daren today with me, it is where we break down our 5 critical element process, and today we're going to spend some time in legacy planning. Over the years of doing this, we have found that if you don't pay attention to one of these 5 critical elements, you can have some holes in your financial plan. So Daren's going to talk to us about trusts in our legacy planning topic. But before we do that, Daren, how's your day going, and anything new in life?
Well, this is a great time of year. We are less than a month away from daylight savings, March Madness, baseball. I mean, this is a great time of year. So
Golf season.
we're coming out of the doldrums of the winter months and getting into the fun times. So this
Yeah.
is a good feeling right now across the office.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for sharing. So let's dig into just the basic topic. What's a trust, and try to keep it as simple as possible because this
Sure.
can go, we can go so far in depth on this. But what's a trust?
Yeah, so a trust, very simply, is just a legal arrangement that you create or that you can create within your overall estate plan. So, a trust is essentially when you decide, hey, as an owner of property that's in your name, you can make a choice to move that property into an entity, in this case, a trust, where you're no longer the official owner of that property. But for most cases, you become what's called the trustee of that property, which gives you essentially all of the um, same powers and responsibilities that you had before as an owner. But for a trust, you just kind of change your title. And the question is, why would you do something like that? Why would you want to remove your ownership of something, into a trust or an entity? There's lots of reasons. A trust is a very valuable tool, and just to be very specific, I'm going to be referring primarily to what's called a revocable living trust. There are all kinds of different trusts. And so, depending on your situation, I would say a trust, in this case, a revocable living trust, is the most common for most of us as far as how we add something to our estate plan. There are trusts out there that are very specific to if you're a very high net worth individual in the United States. The trusts, there are specific types of trusts that make more sense for those people. Also, if you're extremely low income or have very little property, there's a good reason to have different types of trusts. But for most of us in the middle, a revocable living trust is what I'm referring to. So when you have a trust, what the best way to think about it is that you are creating rules over your lifetime for how you want that property to be treated after you have passed away. And a lot of people would say, and this is a very common misconception. A lot of people think that a trust is the same thing as a will, but they are very different. They essentially carry out a lot of the same processes at the end of life, but a trust does it, in our opinion, just in a much more efficient, in a more manageable and more controlled way after you've passed on. So, for us, when we talk to our families about having a trust, it's really important to be proactive. If you have a home, if you have a home outside of the state, like another residence, like a vacation home that's in a different state, if you have a large or a significant amount of money that is not inside of qualified retirement accounts, so we call those taxable brokerage accounts a lot of times. So there's a reason that you want to start to shift some of your assets into that trust while you're alive, while you are competent and capable of managing those things, because it makes the back end of finalizing your estate so much smoother. And the biggest reason for that is that a trust, anything owned by your trust, will avoid any probate process. So, a probate process, if anybody who's watching this, I'm sure most people have experienced some form of probate with their family. And typically, the probate process, everybody gets through it, but a lot of people have a really good feeling about probate because it's long. In the state of Indiana, it's going to last somewhere around 9 months, and it takes time for the attorneys to clear everything up through the probate process and then distribute the assets upon that time after probate. Where a trust, you can skip over all of that and still accomplish the same things that you may have laid out in your will to kind of lay out how you want assets to move. It just skips over that. It saves you some money on the back end because you're not paying attorney's fees to go through that probate process. You're not wasting extra time. It allows the trustee who takes over after you've passed away, it allows them to kind of step right in and within a much shorter amount of time and a much more efficient amount of time, deliver the assets to the beneficiaries that you name in the way that you see best fit. So some people like to think that, well, I don't have enough money for a trust. I disagree. I am somebody right now, Aaron, you may be in a similar situation where we have kids that are still in school, they're minors. I don't have a whole lot of, assets built up today, but I do have life insurance. And I want to make sure that my life insurance, if something happened to me and my wife, I don't want that to go into a custodial account that my kids have access to when they turn 18. Some people might be okay with that, but I don't know about you, Aaron. When you were 18, receiving a large amount of money at 18 just is probably a bad idea for most people. So by
100%.
having that money flow into my trust from my life insurance, that's going to essentially lock that money up. It's going to help take care of my kids until they reach a certain age, and it's going to be distributed to them at a time when I feel like they're more old enough and more responsible to handle that on their own. For people who are in a different stage of life where they don't have, they have adult children now and actually grandchildren, a trust, again, that it allows them to have some control because, as we know, not all beneficiaries are created equal. And so rather than just giving everything the same to all of the kids, you can have separate rules for each of your kids because some of your kids may not be as responsible with their finances. They may have addiction issues. They may have, a marriage that's not going well or that could potentially end in divorce. Things that happen to them when they're adults that a trust allows there to be certain protections for them at that time. A lot of times people think trusts are there for creditor protection. There are types of trusts for that. But in this case, for a revocable living trust, we're not doing it for creditor protection. We're doing it to give control over our estate after we're gone for the beneficiaries. We're doing it to make sure that we avoid the probate process. We're doing it to make sure that at the end of your life, that it's a way to iron out as many friction points that could come up along the way when an estate is being settled. So it doesn't solve every single issue. There's still plenty of things. That's why we focus on what we call legacy planning, which is not just the money, but actually, the best way to transfer assets and focusing on the family dynamics and keeping a harmonious family after you've passed on. That's really, really important. But as far as the financial side, making sure that a trust is properly written, updated over time as laws change, life changes, different things that come along, that you're constantly staying on top of that to make sure that, hey, if something happens to me tomorrow, I can sleep better at night knowing that, hey, this has all been well taken care of and it's going to teach my family, like, hey, dad, mom really thought through this, made sure that, this was done as easily as possible. I really like the amount of thought they put into it to, kind of pass that on to the next generation as well. So, trusts are great. I don't get to talk about them as much as I want to, Aaron. Trust me. I really like to talk about them and educate people on them because there is a stigma that we are trying to eliminate. That anybody that comes into our office, anybody that asks me a question on the street, that I can give them an idea to say, hey, this is not as complicated as what you might think it is.
Sure.
It's actually a really good planning tool. It's something that everybody should consider at a minimum to make sure that you're really kind of playing out the game at the end of life to say, hey, how does this work? What's the most efficient way to do this? And almost everybody I talk to, for the most part, they want to make sure that things pass the right way. They don't want it to be clumsy. They don't want it to be unorganized. They don't want it to take too much time. They don't want it to cost a bunch of money.
Yep.
And so a trust is a really good way to solve a lot of those problems for people.
Well said, Daren. You covered a lot in a short amount of time. Two things I want to add real quick. As Daren was talking, he laid out brilliantly what they're designed for. A lot of times people think about how assets should pass after life. But also, I would want to encourage you, a trust is also designed to help you when you can no longer make decisions on your own. And so, how do you
Absolutely.
want to be taken care of during life when you can no longer make good decisions? And so that happens to people. We see it in practice all of the time. And the second thing is we encourage people to have family meetings, have these conversations with your family members. The worst thing that you can do is set up a trust and not tell anyone about it and let your successor trustee not understand your true wishes. And so maybe that's a topic that we can go into next time on legacy planning, is what are the responsibilities of a successor trustee. But just make sure that your family is aware of your wants and wishes and have those conversations. And so, Daren, anything else before we wrap up?
No, you're exactly right, Aaron. Just to kind of elaborate, you know, we see it on a regular basis. We take care of a group of families, over the 1,260 families that we take care of. It doesn't matter how much money you have. Family dynamics, are always there. And there is something about talking about money with family, especially maybe in Indiana or, different states where it just kind of seems like a taboo topic. But
Mm-hmm.
trust me, trust me, trust me. I mean, if you can have a conversation, lay out your game plan. The kids may not like it, but I highly doubt that they're going to be upset by you telling them and what the plan is, because they don't want to see you gone, but they also if they're like me, it'd be nice to be able to kind of plan ahead, and kind of be prepared, not be caught off guard. Just a simple thing is knowing where the documents are at so they can access them easily. Sharing if the kids are acting as a trustee or if they're beneficiaries, whatever it may be, making sure that they understand what their responsibilities are. And that just helps kind of, again, iron out the friction points that we know are coming. You can't necessarily avoid all of them, but a good proactive legacy plan considers all these things and tries to solve them and answer questions well in advance of the time that you've actually passed away. Or like Aaron, like you said, if you reach any kind of cognitive or physical decline that prevents you from controlling or making decisions for yourself later in life. So they're wonderful things. The American people need to know more and more about them because not enough people incorporate them into their estate plan. And one thing at FEG is we want to make sure that we can simplify it for our families and help them understand the value of them and incorporate them as much as possible.
Very much so. If you have questions, or if you even have a current trust in place that has not been updated in some time, please reach out to us. We have the ability to review that trust. We can give you some things to think about internally here at FEG with a system that we use to evaluate trusts and even put those in place. Daren is our go-to guy when it comes to our trust planning. So please reach out to him if you have questions. You can see there it says talk to FEG at Your Life After Work. Just note that to Daren if you do have trust questions, so that he can help answer those. If you want to have a review of your trust, call us 800-928-4001. Scan that QR code on the screen. That links you to the advisor team's calendar. We're more than happy to help you. Sit down with you, give you a complimentary next steps meeting where we will cover your specific situation in 90 minutes. We'll give you things to think about today, things to think about in the future, and if we decide to partner together, a written plan on what FEG will do for you and your family. Thank you so much for watching. You all have a blessed day.